Hello, this is part 2 of Problems of Philosophy's second extra lecture. We left off on the second objection to Pascal's wager that Zagzebski is considering. So, a lot of people with religious faith find the idea of betting on rewards and punishments as morally disgusting, morally repugnant. You shouldn't have faith because of external rewards or some selfish desire to gain something, but because instead you should believe in God because it's valuable in and of itself. It's morally right or correct in and of itself. And Zagzebski says that's fine. But again, it's not directed toward believers. It's still in this narrow context where someone is struggling and they're trying to figure out a way to make a decision. So this is a decision-making process for those people. And once they decide that they should be a believer, which is the only logical outcome of the wager, according to Pascal, then they should, of course, strive as hard as they can to love God for he, she, it, or its own sake. Yeah. Real faith will then follow that decision. And that leads us pretty neatly into the next counter-argument that Zagzebski talks about. And this is in the middle of page 273. A lot of people look at this argument and say, we can't really decide what to believe in that way. As an experiment, try to imagine yourself, whatever you believe, whether you're a theist, an atheist, or agnostic. Imagine deciding to believe the opposite. And that could be true of any belief, not just beliefs about God. It could be your belief on the best way to live a life, the value of relationships, of family, of having kids or not, of money. And it just doesn't seem right to talk about beliefs or think about beliefs in this way. We don't decide consciously to believe something starting from time 0. We have the beliefs we do because we think and feel that they're right. And Pascal anticipates this and says that the only way to change a real belief is to practice. So do what believers do. Go to church, listen to what they tell you, practice how they tell you to practice, and eventually real belief will follow. Many people are still upset with this, however, where it doesn't really seem authentic. There's something artificial and contrived about it. Zagzebski has a couple of examples as to why this might not be the case. It can work because you're motivated to make it work. This is something you're neutral about. You're neutral as to whether God exists or not. But now, on top of that, you have a motivation to believe. Because the argument has convinced you of what you must do. It's important that you were neutral on it before. So she used an example about jazz and about marriage. We'll talk about the jazz one first. Regardless of what you actually believe, imagine that you're neutral as to whether or not listening to jazz is enjoyable. You have no belief on it, either pro or con. So now imagine that there is a billionaire jazz lover. And he says in 2 years' time, he'll flip a coin. And if it lands on heads, he'll give every dedicated jazz lover $1 million. So you, as a person neutral to jazz, think about it, and it seems like that wager might be worth it to take. So you have 2 years. You're neutral to jazz, but you're motivated to like it. So now you go with all your free time to jazz shows, you read histories, you watch movies, and in all likelihood, at the end of the 2 years, you'll love jazz just by practicing. There is a more problematic example, though, that Zagzebski uses. And it highlights some issues where is it moral or not to do this? And can you really, in all cases, make yourself feel something? And this is the marriage example. So imagine a wealthy man falls in love with a very poor woman. And he wants to marry her, but she feels nothing for him. So this isn't negative, this isn't positive. He's just a guy to her. She's in that same situation. She's neutral, but she's motivated to make it work. If she can love him, the rewards are great. Now you might feel in a situation like this, it's a lot harder to guarantee that you'll end up loving a person just because you try. But still, even if the chances are low, it might be a bet that you should try. And that presents another problem. It's that external reward thing again. People feel like it's morally wrong somehow to not be motivated by the relationship itself, but instead the external reward. What Zagzebski says in counter to this even is that human motives are complex. We don't find it morally repugnant when parents want children to find partners who are financially stable, and that seems like an external reward as well, not just love for its own sake or partnership and trying to perfect partnership internally. So it's not 100% clear on whether or not Pascal's wager could be a valuable tool in the context of people who are confused and trying to make a decision. So now that we have looked at the two contemporary authors, we are going to take a look at a selection from Pascal's words themselves to see whether or not they missed anything that we should take note of. This starts on page 323. He starts the selection talking about faith itself. Believers don't need reasons, he says, and they're correct in not needing reasons. Remember, these conceptions of God are that God is infinite and has no parts. So that's completely imposed to us. We can't really imagine or conceive of a being that is actually infinite, eternal, and the parts thing is a little bit technical, but you can think of it as everything we see and that we are can be broken down into smaller and smaller parts, like atoms. Another conception of a philosophical kind of God is that God's not like that. He is a whole, a unity. So we're divided into many parts, and we're finite. So we cannot comprehend such a being with our limited abilities. So this is Pascal saying, yeah, okay, I understand faith, and this is still this metaphysical ignorance. So why should I be okay that they chose faith in the face of this metaphysical ignorance? So the one thing we didn't talk about with Zagzebski or Blackburn is that Pascal tries to formulate an argument where we must choose. We can't escape the idea of God. So we are forced to decide one way or another, even if we make that decision passively. So if we're forced to make this decision, we shouldn't be passive about it. So that sort of plays into the repugnance counter argument, where people don't think you should be externally motivated to believe in God or not. Because if it's not a choice, if you're forced to make a decision just by the fact that the concept of God is something that you can't avoid, then maybe it's no longer maybe it's no longer morally repugnant to choose if you're a person that's confused about what to do. So we can't use reason. We've talked about that extensively. So we have to figure out what to do. And if we are this confused person, then we have to figure out what to believe. So that's the end of the second extra lecture, part 2. If you have any questions or are confused about anything, please send me an email. Thank you.